I would like to start today's discussion by going back to the beginning. And I'm not talking about the beginning of your career specifically, more about the beginning of the sector, about where it all started. Because I know you've been exposed to the ICT sector from a young age. And I'm curious to know how it used to look back then.
Well, Kuwait specifically has been active in adopting IT since the early 80s. As a matter of fact, IBM had a center here in Kuwait with Kisser as early as the 80s. It was the only one in the region. Just explains how early technology was being adopted on a thinking level, at least in the think tanks like Kisser. I remember when I was very young, when Apple came up with the Apple II, which was the PC of what started the PC movement, let's say.
Yes.
KOC and Ahmedi had an Apple IIe lab, and that was the first time I ever experienced a computer.
Okay.
And this is before my father created Sakhar or launched Sakhar. So this was pre-Windows, pre-DOS, it was really just the Apple II. And that was also in Kuwait. So Kuwait had both IBM and Apple set up labs and shops as early as the very, very early 80s.
Mm-hmm. Were you involved in the landscape at the time in any way?
I was 6, maybe. So,
okay, so there was
I wasn't really involved.
Right. But at what point did it go from something you were passionate about or you were interested about into something that you actually started pursuing?
Well, it sort of was the family business like everyone else, really just I had the option and of either enjoying the family business and choosing to continue in some sort of vertical that's related to the business or at least the foundation. And I'm one of my siblings that decided to do that. And we started the family business basically was in the distribution of electronics, and it started.
Can you also name it? I want everybody who maybe is not familiar with it to know exactly what we're talking about.
Sure. So I think in the 60s, my father started a company called Al Electronics.
Okay.
And Al means international, but the name is Al, and that became the brand. And it started with distribution of electronics. He saw the electronics as the future. This is the 60s. And so electronics was simply in the beginning, like TVs. People needed the TV, right? So everyone watches a TV. We're talking about the era before the TV.
Exactly.
And then when the TV came and whoever was the TV agent, took a lot of market share. And my father saw that early and he went into a sector where the more established, traditional, let's say, distribution or agent families, the ones that distribute the cars and sort of had a strong grip on certain agencies, and they didn't see that coming. And so he kind of looked at things where there was a clear void and a clear potential. We did that, and then that's moved on into other electronics and started with the office equipment machines like photocopiers and fax machines or telex machines back then. And then early computers. And then we decided that it was time to build an Arabic computer. And that's when the Sakhar project launched in 82.
Okay. I think it's interesting. You mentioned the family business. And because I'm sure that you were around your father a lot and you got to hear a lot of the things that were discussed back then, looking at the sector at large, how were the discussions different back then? What were people focusing on at the time?
Well, back then, I think the whole region was just considered a distribution center. This is a place where you can move boxes, basically, and just make your margin and maybe some, after-sales support, maintenance contracts, maybe. But it wasn't really looked at anything but that. Mm-hmm. And it was small, right? It was a nascent part of the world.
Yes.
All of it, Kuwait, Saudi, put them together. This is in the 80s, in the 70s. And then there was population explosion. Mm-hmm. And now I think the GCC is just 45 million people, which, puts it up there as one of the biggest countries in Europe or the biggest states in the US with a high disposable income. and low
Yes.
taxes. So it makes it one of the most sought after places for the business development. But back then, to answer your question, people were much simpler. It was easier conversation. You just became an agent. You signed an agency agreement, mostly exclusive. And then you were in charge of marketing, sales, and distribution. And maybe, as I said, support, like maybe workshops and whatever. But it was a much simpler conversation. I remember people would just go to international fairs like CeBIT in Hanover, Germany, or CES in Las Vegas, which is a computer electronics show,
Yes.
and a consumer electronics show, sorry. And it's still one of the biggest. And still a lot of launches are done there. In the region, I think here there's GITEX in Dubai was the thing back then. And a lot of the tech companies and electronics companies would demonstrate their products there. And if they were new, they would find their match in every local business market. And so you would just go and sign an agency and take it over and bring it here. And then if it picks up and it gets network effect and people like it, then you make a lot of money. And if it doesn't, then you're stuck with stock.
Yes.
You know,
Physical stock.
stock that things you don't, or maybe sometimes you can re-export
Yes.
to other markets. But that was how simple it was back then.
I agree with that because I know even to this day, trading itself, it's an important part of Kuwait's economy. And because back then the focus was more on trading, I want to ask you, when you think about how the ICT sector operates, what would you say are the main differences between back then?
Yeah.
The focus back then was on trading.
Trading.
What do you see
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the focus today? How
Yeah,
do you feel
okay.
it evolved?
Yeah, so back then, as I said, people were looking at this. It's a very good point, by the way. It was an extension of the trading sense of the merchant, where if you look at hundreds of years ago, the Kuwaitis and some of the other Gulf states, including Bahrain, and were major traders. It was called, merchant marine. And what they did is they were seafarers that went from Karachi to the east, Africa, maybe Zanzibar, and all the way up to Basra in Iraq. And that route sort of connected the whole world with Africa, India, and the Gulf
Yes.
and Arabia. And India back then was the British East India Company was one of the largest conglomerates in the world.
Yes.
It's bigger than like what companies are today in terms of a global footprint. And Karachi was one of the main hubs, and Kuwait was very much connected to that. And so our family's always been into merchant marines. I mean, my grandfather and great-grandfather both were traders.
Yes.
And we had offices in Basra and Karachi and Kuwait. And we had telegraph and telegrams. And I still have a lot of these documents. So it's in our nature to be traders. But as I said, in the 80s was, I think, the end of the agency era, and now more as a solution provider. And that's when I saw the flip, when it became more software based. And like Microsoft came in the game, and Oracle and all those big companies. You needed support. You needed technical people that knew much more on a software level to support post-sale activities and build and
Yes.
integrate and do all kinds of technical support. So it became the local partner had to become much more advanced and intelligent, and in order to provide the support level needed. And the good old days basically is no longer. You're just being a simple trader. You buy something and sell it, or you become an agent and distribute. Those were done, and now you need a much more sophisticated apparatus.
Yes, I was actually going to ask you, somehow summarizing all of this, if you feel that what's happening today is a continuation of what started back then, or if you feel that today we're in a completely different phase.
Well, a lot of things changed, even on the global world trade level. I mean, the WTO kind of canceled agents, and Kuwait, and one of the few places that still operates on exclusive agreements. When you go anywhere in the world, there's distributors and solution providers that give you some sort of protection
Yes.
But otherwise, the whole notion of being an agent doesn't exist.
Yes.
Now it's all, there was a World Trade Organization, WTO, signed an agreement that said that doesn't make sense anymore because it requires much more than that and it doesn't lock people in. I mean, it protects the local agent because they put a lot of effort in building the brand and supporting it and all the showrooms and the money they invested in building it. So yes, they need exclusivity. It only sounds fair. Those are the good ones. But some of the bad ones, and I remember out of experience, we'd go to these shows and they would just go because of their big name. And you have these low-level salespeople basically go there, collect, show them a deck or a presentation. This is who we are. This is who our boss is. Our boss is connected to this guy, and our boss's cousin is the minister, and all kinds of things, and take all these good products and basically lock them in, either to prohibit competition,
Okay.
or because they're just sloppy and lousy and complacent and just want to sit on it until they feel like it. And so that was for the bad people, let's say the bad agents.
Yes.
That helped some of the big companies, some of the smaller companies get into the market. And today, the game is much more sophisticated. With computers getting into everything, and now AI getting into everything, you really, you can't just bet on old trading techniques. You have to be a much more sophisticated added value partner. And I think that's what changed.
So would you say it's a continuation, or is it something completely different?
No, the game changed for sure. I mean, look at all the big trading families in Kuwait. They've all yes, some of the core businesses are still there, but none of the, there isn't a family that just sells cars.
Yes, true.
You know what I mean? Or there's a family that just, distributes milk or milk products or has a milk factory. They changed.
Yes.
And everyone's much more diversified. But besides that, I'll take ourselves for an example.
Yes.
When I was looking at, as I was getting older and, finished high school, getting into college and still meeting with the people from those big corporates like Dell and Intel and Microsoft and other similar companies, I was now in business school and I was looking at their stocks and their share price, and their share prices were going much higher than any money we made out of distribution or margins. And so I thought it would be best to invest in these companies now that we know and we have access, rather than just sit here and push boxes for them. And everyone makes money and I make little margins because, when you order the product,
Yes.
you need a banking note or some sort of LC or something to do that. So the bank starts making money even before you get the product.
Yes.
And then the salespeople make money. The person who sold that to you from that company, he made his target, he made his quota.
Exactly.
And then you sell it to some, you get some contract and you sell like 1,000 TVs to X entity. And then you wait 18 months to collect. The bank is charging you money.
Yes.
And then by the time everything is done and you do the tally, you make the least amount of money is the agent.
Exactly.
Even your salespeople make more money, in terms of economies of scale. I mean, like how much they make on their effort versus what you make. And so I thought it was ridiculous, to make money that way. And I wanted to expand into other things.
Especially if you have the capabilities.
Especially if you have the access, the know-how, the judgment,
Exactly.
and the realization that you need to change before you have to. And that's why a lot of complacent people that just sat there being happy, they lost their agencies. How many big families lost their car dealership to another family? In
Okay.
Kuwait in particular.
Okay.
Big names now are like this generation, doesn't know them. And like in the 80s, every billboard in the highway was their name because they were sleeping on the wheel and being too complacent. The others who actually reinvent themselves continuously, they become, of course, more present and more influential in any sort of business environment because they know that they need to readapt and reinvent themselves.